Hey, we've been talking a lot about this morning about the Brave contracts, and that is an example of how a private individual can take steps to influence public policy and maybe in some ways get what they want out of it, in some ways maybe even make a dollar or two. Our guest right now is Brian Trascher. His book is called Laws and Sausage. You will never want to see either one get made. Brian, thanks for being with us. This is actually a phrase Bill says a lot. Nobody wants to see the sausage getting made.
Yeah, and first of all, thanks for having me on this morning, guys. Radio is my first love, going back to my my KLSU days. I just got to I just got to meet Richard Condon. It's like it's like Radio Hall of Fame here. It's like, and being in a non-government subsidized studio is nice too.
Those are going to go away pretty soon.
Yeah.
Well, tell us what inspired the book Laws and Sausage. This is basically about lobbying for every person, right?
Yeah. So the number one question I've get asked in 20 years of being a lobbyist is, how did you get in, or what does a lobbyist do, and how did you get into it? And so after answering that question so many times and coming up with so many versions of the answer, I decided to just brain dump it into a book. Truth be known, I was just a little bored over the Christmas holiday, so I decided to bang it out. I banged it out in about 3 weeks. But it's a quick read. Probably, most people could probably finish it in an hour or two. But all it does is it goes through and talks about how anybody, regardless of your background, regardless of your education or skill set, can learn how the public policy process works and how you can get involved and make a difference.
The thing is, a lot of us will write to our congressman or our senator, or we'll call our congressman, call our senator, but not everybody feels like their words are heard. How do you make sure that your message is getting across?
So the book goes into a lot of different techniques you can use, from using social media, from how to build coalitions, strengthen numbers. I mean, like you said, you can write a letter or send an email to an elected official. They'll get it. Somebody will read it, and they'll file it away. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they'll have a little tick sheet of how many people are for or against a certain issue. But you have to go through a certain process to make yourself recognizable and memorable. And that is the most important part of the process. The phrase, laws and sausage, you never want to see either one get made. It gets attributed to a lot of different people: Otto von Bismarck, Mark Twain. It was actually John Godfrey Sachs, who's a lawyer and a poet. He was at the University of Michigan, I believe. He was published in the Cleveland Daily Herald, which I don't know how that happened, mm-hmm. but and the way he said it was, laws like sausage cease to inspire in proportion as we know how they are made. Which, you know what I mean? That's good old English right there.
There is, and we watch our legislature very closely, and we see what's happening, and we quite frankly just guffaw over some of these laws. But one of the things you do is you teach people how to engage when it comes to the laws being made.
Look, one of the things that inspired me also to write the book was that ever since the election, I've seen all these protests going on around the country. And look, that's a fundamental right, but you're not getting anything done. Okay, protesting in the street might be a fun social experiment, but it's not making a difference. The revolution is in the halls of government. You have to know how to work that process if you want to see change made. I'm going to tell you right now that, again, watching all these folks protesting in the street, the number one thing I would yell at them all the time is, everybody thinks that the right to free speech is the number one thing guaranteed to us in the Bill of Rights. It's not. It's the right to petition your government. That is the most powerful right given to American citizens under the Constitution. And this book attempts to teach people how to enact that right.
You mentioned the halls of government. I covered the state capitol for 7 years. I saw a lot of stuff going on literally in the halls. As a lobbyist, and you've worked the Capitol,
yeah.
How many deals do you think you struck that were in the halls or in somebody's office or right outside a committee room?
Oh, listen, if I don't have my deal struck before I walk in the door, then it's not going to happen. So, the inside the building, it's a euphemism, the halls of government, because inside the building is just where the formality happens. However, again, that's somebody who's been doing it as long as I have. For somebody that's just getting started, or maybe has just they're a one-issue group or person, it is. You go in there and you find out what's your committee of jurisdiction. You go and you provide your testimony. You get what I call the T-shirt brigade. You get 20 people wearing the same T-shirt. Believe it or not, lawmakers look at that. They look up and they say, why are all these people wearing yellow T-shirts? This must be a thing I should pay attention to. Little tips like that are in the book.
Some of them roll their eyes at the T-shirts, too.
Yeah, well, yeah, and they should never roll their eyes at anything because of the internet.
Chris Courtney, our esteemed producer, often talks about the bacon-wrapped shrimp crowd, and I'm thinking that you may be part of that bacon-wrapped shrimp crowd from time to time. But there is a lot more to lobbying and legislation than just sitting down and drinking some good scotch and eating that bacon-wrapped shrimp.
Yeah, well, yeah, there definitely is. And, thanks to ethics reform, we can only spend so much on legislators. So there's not as many bacon-wrapped shrimp as there used to be. It's more like, and look, bacon's meat candy. I'm not trying to talk bad about bacon, right? But yeah, look, I mean, legislators let's just take the Louisiana legislature, for example. During session, every single one of them gets invited to breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to be impressed by a meal. But a lot of times when you can get them outside, away from their handlers, and just kind of, let their hair down, be themselves, that's when you can really talk substantively with them and really get your clients, wishes and asks in front of them in a way that they can understand and be personable about.
I've often thought it was a little bit insulting to lawmakers to think they could be bought by a steak from Ruth's Chris. I mean, come on.
Yeah, I mean, look, since the recession, we've had to start leasing lawmakers. We can't buy them anymore.
What advice do you have for someone? There's always someone listening that's got an issue, and they would like to affect change based on their issue. We've got people that don't like vaccines. We've got people that don't like the education system. How do you get that ball rolling?
So the first thing you do is go to Amazon and buy a copy of Laws and Sausage. You can go to lawsandsausage.net because it really is a 101. I mean, I could have called it lobbying for dummies, but that's almost an oxymoron. Don't think that you can't make a difference, okay? The only thing that's ever changed the world is a small group of committed citizens, right? So don't think that you can't. Don't think that lawmakers don't care about what you have to say just because you don't have a large organization or a large checkbook, because they do. The number one thing that any lawmaker cares about is getting reelected, okay? Now, what feeds into that? Not just campaign contributions, but being responsive to their constituents. So if you have say that you mentioned education. So you're gonna want to talk to the chairman of the Education Committee in the House and Senate. Okay, if you don't live in those chairman's district, you find somebody who does, and you bring them to the meeting with you. You bring them to the committee room with you, because they will listen to somebody that lives in their district. Whether they agree with them or not, they will not ignore somebody that is their constituent. It's just bad business.
Mm-hmm. So you really can't afford to let that happen.
No, they can, and they're not going. Look, I mean, politicians get a bad rap. I always say they're like diapers. They should be changed often, usually for the same reason. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, most people go into that business with a clean heart, and they go in because they do want to make a difference. And it's very easy to fall into the capital crowd and become very cynical. But the truth is that when you know how to talk to that person and find the person inside of them that first got the idea to run for office, and that's the person you talk to, that's when you can actually get them to open up and really get them to listen to what you're saying.
Have you found that there are issues that you will not lobby for because it might ruin your credibility with the lawmakers who let you in when you call?
So I try to stay away from social issues. Believe me, I have an opinion on everything. I do belong to a political party. I do have an ideological slant, but I try to stay away from social issues because it's too emotional. The people get too emotional, the lawmakers get too emotional, and I have to build relationships on both sides of the political aisle, and that's the fastest way to ruin one is a social issue. So I try to, for lack of a better term, take issues that I don't really care about.
Brian, somebody listening to the program right now is thinking lobbyist, and they're saying lobbyist equals scumbag. Well, what do you say to that? Because, I mean, there are people that just automatically presume you're a lobbyist, you're a bad guy.
Yeah, it is a four-letter word. And look, if I had former Congressman Bob Livingston wrote the foreword to my book.
I noticed that.
And he said in his foreword that it's an honorable profession, and if you do it right and you adhere to strong integrity and ethics policies, then it's an honorable career. And I mean, this is a guy who had just an amazing political career before becoming a lobbyist. Look, when you go to court, you bring a lawyer with you, right? I mean, even a lawyer brings a lawyer to court with him, right? Because you want to make sure that you are properly represented by somebody that knows how to work the system. So people that can afford to have a lobbyist, that's what they do. They say, look, maybe I don't know enough about how the government works, or I just don't simply have time to go down there and sit at the Capitol all day while these things are going on. But just because you can't afford a lobbyist doesn't mean that you can't learn how to work the system. You can learn to do what I do. And that's kind of what I attempted to do with this book, is give somebody a good start. Now, if they want to graduate into the master's program, then they can call me up and we can talk. But this will definitely put you on a starting track.
We have had some examples in recent years of grassroots citizens groups, organizing, coming to the Capitol and affecting change.
Absolutely. I mean, look, there's been taxes that have been defeated. There's been a lot of legislation that's been passed and defeated. Look at the criminal justice reform. That was like a major piece of legislation that was passed this last session. And that's been going on as long as I can remember. I mean, I go back to the Foster administration, and they've been trying to get this kind of criminal justice reform passed. And that the will for legislators to finally move it forward came from the grassroots. I can promise you that.
Yeah, time for us to wrap it up. Listen, the book is called, I just got so into the conversation I completely quit watching the clock, Laws and Sausage. You never want to see either one getting made. The author is Brian Trascher. And, Brian, we thank you so much for being on the program this morning.
Yeah, and I'm excited that LSU has announced that they've identified a tiger for this season. Let's just hope that the tiger identifies as a tiger, right?
Yeah, Mike 7.
Thanks, guys.
There you go.
Brian Trascher, thanks for being our guest. Laws and Sausage is the book. Get yourself a copy and give it a read. Going to take a pause, and we'll be back with more on AM Baton Rouge. Talk 107.3 FM, WBRP.